Hey guys, today I just wanted to share with you this machine. This is one of my little project machines that I kind of wanted to share with you guys. And this is my 486 50 megahertz DX Beast machine. It's basically just a project computer I wanted to show you guys that I put together. It's kind of like the 50 megahertz DX 486 chip. It's a slightly uncommon chip, and its thing is it's very notorious for getting a reliable system working around it. It's also kind of an interesting chip because it runs on a really high frontside bus for a 486, so it's kind of a challenge to put together one of these machines and kind of get it running stable. So it was, just kind of a fun project. First thing you'll probably notice is there's no CD drive on this machine. There's not a reason there couldn't be a CD drive on the machine. I just didn't need one. This isn't my day-to-day main 486, so it wasn't really necessary. And I originally did have one installed, but the IDE controller card, I'm using a SIG IDE/floppy controller, and for whatever reason, it just does not detect CD-ROM drives. I tried different drives. It doesn't have to do with the frontside bus of the CPU, because I've tested different frontside buses and CPUs on this. It's the same result. So I think it's the controller card. For some reason, it's not configured right, or it just doesn't seed CD drives, but it wasn't important. I was able to transfer whatever files I needed with the zip drive and the floppy drive. And the zip drive is detected just fine with the controller. Before I open this thing and show you guys inside, I'm probably going to need to explain why this is kind of a fun project computer. I know other people that are into retro computers kind of like to build 50 megahertz DX machines just kind of for fun, for the challenge. And they were a little unusual, a little uncommon. The thing was, back in the day, well, first I'm going to have to explain real quick, super simplified explanation of frontside bus. If you think of the CPU in a computer as the brain, if you think of it as a body, and the CPU is the brain, and it does all the thinking, think of the frontside bus as the nervous system. And basically what it does, it's the speed at which the information travels, outside of the CPU, so to the RAM, to the chipset, to all those things. So it is pretty important to the overall speed of the computer. So back in the day, 486 and before, the CPU speed was pretty much tied to the frontside bus. So if you had a 33 megahertz DX 486, your frontside bus was 33 megahertz. You had 16 megahertz 286, you had a 16 megahertz frontside bus. The problem was, when they started getting to 40 megahertz, the technology really wasn't up to snuff at the time, and the motherboards really just couldn't cope with that high frontside bus. And so, even getting 40 megahertz frontside buses was a challenge. 50 megahertz was a nightmare by all accounts to get running stably. Now, they did eventually work that out, but by that time clock doubling had come around, and there wasn't really much point in it. All clock doubling does, it kind of decouples the CPU from the motherboard, so you can have a faster CPU running. So for instance, the 486DX-50. Now when you have a DX2 on a 486, that means it's clock doubled. So the frontside bus is 33 megahertz, but the CPU itself internally is running at 66. It doubles the frontside bus inside. Well, actually it doesn't double the frontside bus. It halves the motherboard. But anyways, I don't want to get into all that stuff. But yeah, so the interesting thing is, you get a huge speed difference even with a 30, when you had a 66 megahertz, a DX2, it's a really fast chip, but it's also really stable and reliable because the frontside bus is running at a reliable 33 megahertz, and you got your CPU, the brain, running at 66 megahertz. But, then you're thinking like, wow, a DX50, that's both. 50 megahertz, it's only a 16 megahertz difference, and your whole thing's running at 50 megahertz. The quest is to see how much of a difference does that make. Does a stable DX system running at 50 megahertz frontside bus and CPU, is that come anywhere close to a DX2 at 66 megahertz. It's technically a faster chip, but your frontside bus, your nervous system is running a little slower. So that's kind of the challenge with putting one of these together. That's one of the things you want to see. The short answer is no, but it is interesting. It was an interesting little project. The problem with when I talk about the unreliability and the instability with these 50 megahertz bus 486s, it manifests itself in different ways. You really have to cherry pick parts. Sometimes it just won't post at all. Random crashes. This, I did not get all the bugs fully worked out of it. As far as I know, the L2 cache does not get detected. And there's some really weird things about it too. But I think it's still a good system to look at for a DX50 system, because I talked to other people over at Vogan's, and I did a lot of research and reading, and the benchmarks I got on this machine were very competitive with other people that built similar machines. People that had similar machines that had functioning L2 cache. I was getting scores equal and sometimes higher in certain things, certain games and benchmarks. So I think this overall, even with possibly my L2 cache not being detected and working, it's still very representative of what a DX50 system can do. So I'm going to open this up and show you guys some of the things in here. This is a really roomy case. Okay. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the camera off the tripod and show you this thing. That might be just easier. Alright, so here is the inside of the machine. You can see there's a lot of space over here. That's my little label. This motherboard it's a FIC 486 GVT. I don't know if you can see that because of the light, but yeah, that's what it is. I couldn't find the exact layout of this motherboard online. There was a lot of jumper configuration specifications and layouts for it, the GVT2. But it almost matched up to this board, but not quite. But I did find out there's a spot, you're not going to be able to see it because it's under this, but the jumpers for the frontside bus are down here. So I had to make my own little thing through experimentation, because I tried a bunch of different CPUs in this, and I did some comparisons, and I made a video that I will show you. That video, that will be at the end of this video. I think it was PCPbench and Doom. I did a lot more. I did like Quake and PCPbench, but I didn't want the video to last, be like 2 hours long. So those are the ones that I'm going to show at the end of this video. And I'm comparing this machine, the 50 megahertz DX, a 50 megahertz DX2, which is a 50 megahertz CPU running on a 25 megahertz frontside bus, 33 megahertz DX, and a 66 megahertz DX2. So it's a little interesting comparison. We can look at the end. This fan is not necessary at all, but what the hell, never really overdo cooling. It's a pretty nice motherboard. We got 2 VLB slots, some 16-bit ISA. This is that. No, this here. This is that SIG controller card for the floppy and IDE. This is just an 8-bit I/O controller card for like parallel port and serial ports, stuff like that. Here's my sound card, just a Vibra Sound Blaster 16. Didn't even really need this in there, but it made testing and playing games and stuff, more fun, I guess, good for testing. I did play a variety of games on this thing, and I didn't have any trouble with them. I played everything from Flight of the Intruder to, well, Flight of the Intruder very briefly because it actually runs too fast on this machine. But, yeah, everything up to Retro City Rampage, which ran pretty slow, but it ran. Here's the DX chip. They're a little bit uncommon. It doesn't usually have a fan and heatsink. I just put that on there. It doesn't actually need a fan and heatsink, but then again, as I said, can't really ever overdo cooling, in my opinion. It does get pretty hot. So here's the video card. Now the video card I'm using, I'm only using one. Even though I have 2 VLB slots or VESA slots, I'm only using see, that's just using the 8-bit. That's not really using the VESA slot. It's using the ISA. So, but I'm only using one because it causes problems. When you're running anything, a frontside bus over 33 megahertz, these cards, these slots are really directly tied to the processor on these 486s. So when you're running with a 40 megahertz or 50 megahertz frontside bus system, you want to keep down the level or the number of VLB cards. It's hard, even on a 40 megahertz system, it's hard to get one of these working right, let alone on a 50. You kind of have to cherry pick the card you use. A lot of people that build these systems, they'll actually just go all ISA. They'll use ISA video card and everything just for the sake of stability. I lucked out. This video card I didn't have any problems with, and this is a Diamond Speedster Pro card, and it's 1 megabyte, and it's running the Cirrus Logic chip. It's a CLGD 5428. Now Cirrus Logic, they made a lot of kind of like mid-range but reliable cards in the 486 era, but near the end of things they seem to really put out a couple really fast graphic chipset, like one of the fastest for ISA. It's real competitive, and I usually see it up there with you know, like the Sang Labs, the ET4000 and stuff like that. So this is a pretty good chipset. This is a pretty fast card, and you know, I can attest it works just fine on this system. I've had no troubles with this card. This might be the reason I'm getting really good results on some benchmarks, even with my L2 cache possibly not working. That's probably why this system still is kind of competitive with other people's. So anyways, here's the L2 cache. I think maybe part of my problem is these are 15 nanoseconds speed. From what I read, you really want to try to get faster ones like 10 or 12 nanosecond chips for L2 cache with a 50 megahertz bus, but you know, I don't have any. It's really not worth my time right now to like hunt them down. I may in the future and see if that does anything, but I don't know. So that's pretty much the gist of the system. I'm gonna boot it up so you guys can just see real quick like the BIOS and stuff like that, and something really weird. Well, it's not weird, but it is. But I'll show you, and then that will probably be the end of the video. But I'll end it with some capture I did comparing the 4 CPUs and 2 benchmarks. So I also want to point out, I think I forgot to mention it, that when you are making a system, even one that's not necessarily, you know, like a project system like this where you're experimenting with a 50 megahertz frontside bus, when you're playing around with the VESA local bus, these slots here, really, these were meant for video cards, even though, of course, like this motherboard comes with 2, I've seen motherboards with 3. The safest bet is always just go with a video card. They make, you know, they make SCSI cards, they make IDE controllers, cache controllers, all kind of stuff that will run on this bus, even like network adapter cards and stuff. But the safest bet is usually the video card, and that's what I, you know, focused on with this. That's really what it was meant for. Now, if I threw in another one like an IDE controller or a SCSI card, I'm positive I would get all kind of crazy reliability problems with the high frontside bus. So the general rule is the more of these VESA cards you add, the more chance you have for reliability issues and stuff like that. I don't even know if I put in a hard drive controller on the VESA slot, I doubt it would even work. I'd bet that it wouldn't work. I'd be very, 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 very surprised if it did. But okay, so let's just go with the, I'll show you the boot up. He always comes over to see what I'm doing. The other dog doesn't really give a damn, but he always comes over and watches me do computer stuff. Anyways, so here is, just another tidbit for you technical guys out there. This card also has a jumper on it for 1 or 0 weight states. Regardless of what I set that jumper to, all my benchmark results have been the same. So I don't know if it's actually doing anything. So let's just start it up. Now I've never quite seen like a BIOS for a 46 like this. It's kind of neat, I kind of like it, but so there's 50 megahertz. Yeah, I've never seen it. It's a Ward BIOS 4.50, but I've never seen one quite like it. So there's the hard drive booting up. Everything's booting up. Now it says 256, but I think that's just, you know, because of the setting there. So there's, yeah, it tries to load the CD-ROM drivers because I was playing around with it, but the mouse, the cute mouse drivers, it does work. I just don't have a mouse attached to it. So that's the boot up sequence, just to show you guys it is running. But here's the, let me go into, hold on. Okay. Sorry. Alright, now as you see that the BIOS thing, when you go into do with the BIOS settings, is actually a very modern looking I see this sort of setup on a lot of Socket 7 boards. So I think this is probably a later motherboard, which might be the reason why it works better with the 50 megahertz bus, because it's a later one. Of course, by this time there was really not much of a point. Most people were using 66 megahertz DX2s, which, despite what some people say, all my benchmarks show that the 66 megahertz DX2 pretty much smokes the 50 megahertz DX. This is the same. I looked at other people's results over at Vogan's, and comparatively it always seems like the 66 megahertz DX2 chip wins despite being on a slower frontside bus. So I'm not saying that in some cases, some programs that are real intensive with outside of the CPU, the I/O transfers and stuff, but those might be competitive or faster, maybe, but I've never seen it. If anyone wants to point out any programs that they can show run faster on the 50 megahertz bus DX50 than, you know, on a DX266, please be my guest. But anyways, one of the things this does that you can go to chipset. Sorry, I'm doing this awkwardly. Okay, so all my cache timings and everything is turbo. There's a fast and a normal. Regardless of what I set it to, even normal, it will. My benchmarks don't change, which is really leading me to believe that the L2 cache just isn't working when this machine boots up. But here's the weird thing. See, the external cache scheme is right back. And now the thing is, if I change it to right through, it won't boot up. It freezes at the hard drive controller. So I don't know. It's just one of the weird little things that goes. But now doing this video and thinking, I wonder what happened if I just use a different controller card. I wonder if it's just the controller card. I don't know. Maybe I'll test that. Huh. Nope, that didn't work. I tried 2 different IDE controllers and they wouldn't even see the hard drive. And that's the reality of working on old computers. It's kind of the fun and the challenge, but it's also where a lot of the frustration comes in, is you can spend hours trying to figure out weird little problems and idiosyncrasies with each setup. It could have been as simple as a jumper, or it could be the frontside bus. It could, you know, it could be so many different things, and it's a lot of troubleshooting. And I mean, that's the reality of the hobby. You can spend hours on, you know, the simplest little things, like just getting a hard drive detected. Where this card, it doesn't seem to work with CD-ROM drives, but boom, it detects the hard drive, no problem. Whereas the other ones I tried, 2 different brands, IS16-bit around the same time period, nothing. Just couldn't get them working. So, you know, that's how it is. But I just want to show you what I was talking about, which is, now if I go into write back, that's the external cache, and I change it to write through, which I believe is the more common way. Sometimes I confuse those. I think write back is like the special faster one that usually gives you trouble. But when I set it to write through, which I believe is the standard, it will do this. Let me skip that memory test. And it hangs. And it just hangs. What the hell? Okay, well this time it did even worse than hanging. It completely, it went black. But that always happens. It either just crashes or it hangs on that that screen right before, you know, like the thing. But yeah, that's another weird little computer issue, and I'm not really sure why it does that. I would expect it to do that the other way around, because I believe write back is the newer type of memory that sometimes causes some incompatibilities, and write through is like the standard, and that's what it does. But anyways, I mean, despite the issue with the L2 cache possibly not being detected, like I said, I for the most part it's pretty reliable. I played lots of games on it, several hours worth of different games, and I didn't have any problems and crashes. Just that that L2 cache issue, which probably gives it a performance hit if that's what the issue is. But like I said, comparing it to other 50 megahertz DX project machines, it's real competitive, even sometimes faster in certain benchmarks. So anyways, I'm going to show you that video now I did comparing the 4 different CPUs on this machine. I changed nothing except the CPU and the frontside bus, so exact same cards and everything. I want to apologize in advance for the Doom benchmark. Right before I did that benchmark, I updated the drivers for my capture device, and unfortunately it reset the parameters, so the brightness was reset to default, so it's a little dark. It's still serviceable, but the image is dark. I'm going to, if I do any more capturing, I will fix that and adjust the brightness, so I apologize for that Doom benchmark's a little bit dark. But anyways, that's pretty much the end of the video. If you want to watch the benchmarks, just keep watching. I've got, like I said, I've got some other cool stuff in the pipeline coming up, so I hope you liked the video. If you want kind of a fun, little challenging project, you know, go build yourself a 50 megahertz DX 486. Just, you know, see if you can get it running reliably. See how fast you can get it. Post your benchmarks in the comments. I'll post my benchmarks for, you know, Doom, Quake, PCPbench, Speedsys, and the 3D bench. But if you have a system like this, post your own, and please tell us your results and what you used and how you got it working. It's a fun little project. It's not super hard. It can be kind of frustrating sometimes. But yeah, thanks for watching.